Yes, you have read that right. I am wrong about the Zhiyun Crane 2S. Now, stop there. It's not necessarily a bad gimbal, but there are certain things that myself and other YouTubers have been pushing that really doesn't work for every single situation. And that one thing is lowering the rear motor of the Zhiyun Crane 2S. So we'll go over why you may not want to do that and also show some examples. Let's hit it. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Geoff Fagien. I'm a filmmaker and DP based in South Florida. If you've seen some of the videos on my channel, you may have noticed I've done a lot lately on the RED Komodo, and when it comes to a gimbal, I've been using the Zhiyun Crane 2S as I really like its portability and its relatively strong motors. Now, the purpose of today's video is to explain why you may not want to lower the rear motor. The Zhiyun Crane 2S comes stock like this. And a lot of YouTubers have been lowering the rear motor, mainly because if you're using a camera like the Pocket 4K or really any DSLR with a screen on the back, if you don't want to have to use an external monitor, by lowering the rear motor, it gets the motor out of the way and you could use the monitor on camera as your primary monitor when gimbal operating. So I figured that I would change the rear motor and I would be able to have the best of both worlds, maybe even do some setups with the RED Komodo where the batteries dangle over the rear motor. After using the Zhiyun Crane 2S for the past few months, in a lot of situations, it's a really great gimbal. But one of the things I started doing was when I got my V-mount plate and V-mount battery for my RED Komodo, I wanted to be able to mount that on the Zhiyun Crane 2S without having to take the battery plate on and off, as unfortunately, that battery plate just seems to be scratching the back of the camera more and more every time I take it on and off. And apparently this happens more on the Stormtrooper versions of the RED Komodo than the normal black production versions. It's something that, I can live with, but I rather it not happen every single time I take on and off the plate. So I started doing things like in the video I'll put up here that I actually ended up unlisting, mounting the RED Komodo with the V-mount battery plate backwards on the Zhiyun Crane 2S. Weight-wise, it should be able to handle it. When you're looking at the gimbal, you're doing some walking movements, it seems like it can handle it. But when you go back and you look at the footage, it needs some post-stabilization in order to make the footage usable. Now, a lot of the shots become extremely usable, especially when you're using 6K. But you're not necessarily using a gimbal to have to do additional post-stabilization after the fact. So I ended up spending the past week trying to figure out what is causing these jitters in the footage, because it's perfectly balanced on the pan axis, it's perfectly balanced on the tilt and roll axis. I just could not figure it out for the life of me. I tried to make the setup as light as I could. So I removed the V-mount battery plate and the V-mount battery, and I just put two BP955 batteries that I had on the Komodo. Weirdly enough, the shake was still there. So when I got home from my trip, I was redoing my office, as you can see here, and I found the original metal arm that came with the Zhiyun Crane 2S that had it in the stock position of the rear motor. So I ended up retooling the rear motor and putting it back in the stock position, rebalancing it with the 955 batteries and the Tokina 11 to 16, and lo and behold, the footage was great again. So in the end, if you're using a heavier setup on the Zhiyun Crane 2S that reaches closer to its weight capacity, I would definitely not lower the rear motor, as it seems that just the angle that the rear motor is at when it's lowered can't handle all of the exact same weight that it can in its stock position, which makes sense because that's why it's in its stock position and not in its custom position. It's cool that Zhiyun gives you the tools to lower the motor if you need to. It just would have been nice if they gave some kind of disclaimer letting everybody know what are the pros and cons of removing that rear motor, because it seemed like everybody I saw on YouTube was doing it. And I followed the trend, and it definitely helped for some cameras, but I'm really using the Komodo primarily on this gimbal, and that just didn't work for me. So I'm happy to see that the footage is back to where it should be on the Zhiyun Crane 2S, and I wanted to put this video out just to warn some of you Crane 2S users, or warn anybody that's considering getting the Crane 2S, of the possibilities that lowering the rear motor could do. If you keep it in the stock position, you can use the weight capacity to its fullest. I am super stoked because I was this close to going out and getting an RS2 because I thought it was something wrong with the Crane 2S. And I'm glad that I put the rear motor back to where it was stock before I made that decision, because now I'm absolutely keeping the Zhiyun Crane 2S, and I'll be shooting on it more over the next few weeks. So that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for watching. And if you got knowledge out of the information I relate to you today, please make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and that notification bell to keep updated with the latest content on the channel. Without further ado, my name is Geoff Fagien. I'll see y'all in the next video.